On Random Recap, we would be taking a look at the 5 mafia family in New York history, their rise and fall. Kindly subscribe to this channel. It helps us bring you more educational content. The 5 families of New York City are the most famous organized crime syndicates in the United States. They are part of the larger American Mafia, a powerful criminal organization with roots in Sicilian and Italian organized crime. These families rose to prominence in the early 20th century and have played a dominant role in organized crime for decades. The 5 families. The 5 families were officially established during the 1931 reorganization of the Mafia under Salvatore Maranzano, who briefly declared himself boss of bosses before being assassinated. These families operate under a loose alliance, following the rules of the Commission, a governing body of the Mafia. The families are 1. Gambino Family. Founding boss, Vincent Mangano. Most notorious leader, Carlo Gambino, who led the family to great power and wealth from the 1950s to the 1970s. Current activities, historically involved in extortion, loan sharking, gambling, and labor racketeering. The Gambino family is considered one of the most powerful mafia families in the United States. Famous figures. John Gotti, known as the Teflon Don for evading convictions until his eventual imprisonment. Paul Castellano, Gotti's predecessor, who was assassinated in 1985 in a high-profile hit. 2. Genovese family. Founding boss, Lucky Luciano, who is widely credited with founding the modern American Mafia. Nickname, the Ivy League of organized crime, due to its wealth and influence. Current activities, historically engaged in racketeering, construction fraud, and money laundering. Famous figures. Vito Genovese took control after Luciano and expanded the family's reach. Frank Costello, known as the Prime Minister of the Underworld, he was influential in both crime and politics. 3. Lucci's family. Founding boss, Tommy Gagliano. Most notorious leader, Tommy Lucchese, who brought the family to prominence. Current activities, involved in drug trafficking, construction, and waste management fraud. Famous figures. Henry Hill, an associate whose story was immortalized in the book and film Goodfellas. Anthony Corallo, a longtime boss known for his low profile and cunning. 4. Bonanno family. Founding boss, Joseph Bonanno. Notoriety, known for internal conflict and being the first family to be publicly exposed due to Joe Bonanno's autobiography. Current activities, historically involved in drug trafficking, loan sharking, and gambling. Famous figures. Joe Bonanno, one of the youngest and longest-serving mafia bosses. Salvatore Sammy the Bull Gravano, a notorious turncoat who testified against John Gotti. 5. Colombo family. Founding boss, Joe Profasi. Notoriety, known for internal feuds and power struggles, including a long and bloody war in the 1990s. Current activities, historically involved in loan sharking, gambling, and labor racketeering. Famous figures. Joseph Colombo, a flamboyant boss who founded the Italian-American Civil Rights League. Carmine Pusico, known as the Snake, a longtime boss who ruled from prison. The Mafia Commission. Established in 1931 by Lucky Luciano, the Commission was a ruling body for the 5 families and other mafia organizations in the United States. It mediated disputes, oversaw joint operations, and ensured that organized crime remained coordinated. Decline in modern-day activities. Law enforcement pressure. The Mafia's influence peaked in the mid-20th century but declined significantly in the 1980s and 1990s due to the RICO Act, Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, which allowed federal prosecutors to target entire criminal organizations. High-profile prosecutions and internal informants, such as Sammy Gravano and others. Current status. While the 5 families remain active in some capacity, their influence has diminished. They have adapted to modern forms of crime, such as cybercrime, but continue to face competition from other criminal organizations. Cultural legacy. The 5 families have been immortalized in popular culture, particularly in films like The Godfather, Goodfellas, and TV shows like The Sopranos. Their stories continue to fascinate and intrigue the public, symbolizing the dark allure of organized crime. The Gambino crime family is one of the most powerful and infamous mafia families in the United States. Its history is marked by periods of dominance in the criminal underworld, as well as internal strife and eventual decline due to law enforcement pressure and internal betrayals. Here's a detailed account of its rise and fall. The rise of the Gambino family. Origins in the Castellammarese War. Formation. The Gambino family traces its origins to the early 20th century during the Castellammare-Reese War, 1930 to 1931, a violent power struggle among New York mafia factions. After the war, Lucky Luciano reorganized the mafia into the 5 families, creating a more structured and cooperative organization. First boss, Vincent Mangano, was named the head of the family, which would later become the Gambino family. Carlo Gambino's leadership. Seizing power. In 1957, Carlo Gambino became the family's boss after orchestrating the assassination of Albert Anastasia, the family's then leader, with the help of Vito Genovese. The Golden Era. Under Gambino's leadership, the family flourished. He ran the family with a mix of cunning and low-profile tactics, avoiding public attention. The Gambino family became involved in labor racketeering, controlling unions to extort businesses, loan sharking, illegal gambling, drug trafficking, and construction, political corruption, ensuring protection and influence. Peak of power. By the 1960s, the Gambino family was the most powerful of the 5 families, with revenues exceeding hundreds of millions annually. The decline begins. Paul Castellano's reign. Succession. When Carlo Gambino died in 1976, he handpicked his cousin and brother-in-law, Paul Castellano, as his successor, bypassing more experienced underboss Aniello Neil Delacroce. This decision caused internal tensions. The boss's weaknesses. Castellano lacked the street credibility of his predecessors and was more focused on white-collar crimes, such as construction extortion and stock fraud, than traditional mafia activities. His opulent lifestyle and preference for avoiding violence alienated many of the family's soldiers and captains. John Gotti's rise. Rebellion. Discontent grew under Castellano's leadership, especially among street-level operatives like John Gotti, who felt neglected and undervalued. The assassination. In 1985, Gotti orchestrated the assassination of Castellano and his underboss, Thomas Bellotti, outside Sparks Steak House in Manhattan. The hit was brazen and highly publicized, marking a dramatic shift in mafia dynamics. Gotti becomes boss. Gotti assumed control of the family, embracing a flashy and public persona. He became known as the Teflon Don because he repeatedly evaded conviction despite several trials. The fall of the Gambino family. John Gotti's downfall. Law enforcement pressure. Gotti's high-profile lifestyle brought intense law enforcement scrutiny. Unlike Carlo Gambino, who operated discreetly, Gotti's brashness made the family a prime target for prosecutors. Samid the Bull Gravano's betrayal. In 1991, Gotti's underboss, Sammy Gravano, turned informant to avoid a lengthy prison sentence. Gravano's testimony helped convict Gotti in 1992 on charges of murder, racketeering, and conspiracy. Gotti received a life sentence and died in prison in 2002. Post-Gotti era. Leadership instability. After Gotti's imprisonment, leadership struggles weakened the family. Gotti's son, John A. Gotti, Jr., attempted to maintain control but faced multiple prosecutions. The Gambino family became fractured, with factions vying for power. Law enforcement crackdowns. The FBI's use of the RICO Act, Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, dismantled much of the family's operations. Informants and undercover operations further undermined the family's secrecy, leading to numerous arrests and convictions. The Gambino family today. Modern activities. While significantly weakened, the Gambino family still operates in a diminished capacity, focusing on cybercrime, small-scale racketeering, remaining ties to unions and legitimate businesses, decline in influence. The family is no longer the dominant force it once was, having lost much of its territory and revenue streams to law enforcement actions and competition from other criminal organizations. Legacy. The Gambino family's story is one of power, betrayal, and eventual decline. It rose to dominate the criminal underworld under Carlo Gambino's leadership, but suffered from internal divisions and external pressures. Its most infamous figure, John Gotti, embodied both the glamour and the downfall of the American Mafia. Today, the family serves as a symbol of the Mafia's former might and the relentless efforts of law enforcement to combat organized crime. The Genovese crime family is widely regarded as the most powerful and sophisticated of New York's 5 families and one of the most influential mafia organizations in the United States. Known as the Ivy League of organized crime, the family has a long history of criminal dominance, operating with a mix of strict discipline, low-profile tactics, and far-reaching influence. The origins of the Genovese family. Roots in the early 20th century. The family traces its origins to 1909, when Giuseppe Morello, an early mafia leader in New York, led a group of Sicilian gangsters involved in counterfeiting, extortion, and murder. His reign ended when he was imprisoned in 1910. The Castellammare-Reese War, 1930 to 1931. In the late 1920s, the family became embroiled in the Castellammare-Reese War, a power struggle between New York mafia factions led by Joe Masseria and Salvatore Maranzano. The war ended when Lucky Luciano, a rising figure in the family, orchestrated the murders of both Masseria and Maranzano. Luciano reorganized the mafia into the 5 families and established the commission to mediate disputes and maintain order. He became the first official boss of what would later be known as the Genovese family. The Golden Age, Lucky Luciano and Frank Costello. Lucky Luciano's leadership, 1931 to 1946. Charles Lucky Luciano is credited with creating. Charles Lucky Luciano is credited with creating the modern structure of organized crime in America. As boss of the Genovese family, he transformed it into a major criminal empire involved in bootlegging during Prohibition, labor racketeering, particularly in New York's garment industry, gambling and prostitution rings. Luciano was convicted of running a prostitution racket in 1936 and sentenced to prison. He continued to control the family from behind bars until his deportation to Italy in 1946. Frank Costello's reign, 1946 to 1957. Frank Costello, known as the Prime Minister of the Underworld, took over as acting boss during Luciano's imprisonment and exile. Costello was less violent than other mob leaders and focused on expanding the family's influence in politics and legitimate businesses, developing strong ties to Tammany Hall, New York's political machine. Costello survived an assassination attempt in 1957, orchestrated by rising mobster Vito Genovese, but retired afterward, ceding power to Genovese. The Genovese era, Vito Genovese leadership, 1957 to 1969. Vito Genovese officially took over the family in 1957, and it was renamed in his honor. Ambition and ruthlessness. Genovese sought to expand the family's involvement in heroin trafficking and solidify its dominance. However, his leadership style alienated many within the mafia, as he was perceived as overly ambitious and power-hungry. Downfall. In 1959, Genovese was convicted of narcotics trafficking, based largely on evidence from undercover agents and informants. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison and died behind bars in 1969. The family's secretive and strategic approach. After Genovese's imprisonment, the family adopted a low-profile strategy to avoid the law enforcement scrutiny that plagued other mafia families, such as the flamboyant Gambinos. Leadership was passed to front bosses, acting figureheads, while real power remained with the family's secretive administration. Major operations. Criminal enterprises. The Genovese family has been involved in a wide range of criminal activities, including labor racketeering, controlling unions, extorting businesses, and rigging contracts in industries like construction, waste management, and trucking. Loan sharking, charging exorbitant interest rates to borrowers unable to secure legitimate loans. Illegal gambling, operating gambling dens, bookmaking operations, and lottery rings. Extortion, demanding protection money from businesses. Drug trafficking, though less prominently than other families to avoid federal attention. Political corruption. The Genovese family maintained strong ties to politicians and public officials, influencing contracts, zoning, and union negotiations. This helped them secure lucrative business deals and avoid prosecution. Notable figures. Lucky Luciano, 1931 to 1946. Founder of the modern mafia and architect of the 5 families system. Frank Costello, 1946 to 1957. Focused on political corruption and legitimate enterprises. Vito Genovese, 1957 to 1969. Ruthless and ambitious, but his leadership ended in imprisonment. Vincent the Chin Gigante, 1981 to 2005. Notorious for feigning mental illness by wandering Greenwich Village in a bathrobe to avoid prosecution. He ran the family from the shadows for decades. Decline in modern-day activities. Law enforcement pressure. The RICO Act. Beginning in the 1980s, federal prosecutors used the Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, RICO, to dismantle mafia families by targeting entire organizations rather than individual members. Informants, key figures, such as Vincent Fish Cafaro, turned informants, exposing the family's operations. Current status. Despite significant setbacks, the Genovese family remains active, focusing on white-collar crimes, such as identity theft and stock market fraud. Traditional rackets, such as gambling and loan sharking. It is considered one of the most stable and resilient mafia families, maintaining influence in New York and beyond. Legacy. The Genovese crime family is synonymous with the height of mafia power and sophistication. It adapted to changing times through secrecy, strategic leadership, and a focus on less visible crimes, allowing it to survive while other families crumbled. Despite its decline, the Genovese family remains a symbol of the mafia's enduring influence in American organized crime. The Lucchese crime family is one of New York's 5 families of the American Mafia. Known for its role in labor racketeering, construction extortion, and other organized crime activities, the Lucchese family has had a long and turbulent history, characterized by both remarkable success and internal discord. Origins of the Lucchese family. The Lucchese family originated in the early 1900s when Gaetano Tommy Reina established a mafia operation in the Bronx and East Harlem. Early activities. Reina's crew was involved in ice distribution, a lucrative industry before refrigeration, and other rackets, including extortion and gambling. The Castellammarese War, 1930 to 1931. During the Castellammarese War, Reina initially sided with Joe Masseria but later aligned with Salvatore Maranzano. In 1930, Reina was assassinated by Masseria's orders, and Tommy Gagliano took over Reina's crew. When the war ended, Gagliano became the first official boss of the family under the new mafia structure established by Lucky Luciano and the Commission. The Gagliano era, 1931 to 1951. Low-profile leadership. Tommy Gagliano ran the family quietly, avoiding the media and law enforcement scrutiny. Under his rule, the family expanded its influence in industries such as garment manufacturing, trucking, and construction. Collaboration. The family worked closely with other mafia families and used its connections to control unions and extort businesses. The Lucchese era. Tommy Lucchese's leadership, 1951 to 1967. After Gagliano's death in 1951, Tommy Lucchese became boss and ushered in a golden era for the family. Key achievements. Expansion of influence. Lucchese built strong ties with political and business leaders, particularly in New York's garment district and construction industries. He secured control over key unions, including the International Longshoremen's Association and the Teamsters Union. Family reputation. The family became known for its efficiency and discipline. It avoided the infighting and instability that plagued other mafia families during this time. Lucchese maintained good relationships with other bosses, particularly Carlo Gambino of the Gambino family. Major rackets. Labor racketeering, controlling unions to extort money and secure contracts. Gambling operations, running illegal gambling rings across New York and beyond. Construction fraud, infiltrating large construction projects to siphon funds and manipulate bids. Lucchese's legacy. Tommy Lucchese died of natural causes in 1967, leaving behind a powerful and well-organized family. The turbulent years, internal struggles, 1967 to 1986. Carmine Tremonti, 1967 to 1973. Interim leadership. After Lucchese's death, Carmine Mr. Gribbs Tremonti was named boss, but he was more of a figurehead due to his declining health. Key event. The French Connection heroin smuggling operation was exposed during his tenure, linking the Lucchese family to a global drug trade. Tremonti was convicted in 1973 and imprisoned. Anthony Tony Dux Corallo, 1973 to 1986. The rise of Corallo. Anthony Corallo became boss in 1973 and was known for his shrewdness and low profile. He strengthened the family's grip on labor racketeering and extortion, especially in New York's construction industry. Key racketeering schemes. Corallo orchestrated schemes to control union contracts, including the powerful Cement and Concrete Workers Union, which handled major public and private construction projects. Downfall. Corallo's habit of conducting business from his car, which was bugged by the FBI, led to the Commission trial of 1986. He was convicted along with other mafia leaders under the RICO Act and sentenced to 100 years in prison. The decline and reorganization, 1986-present. Victor Amuso and Anthony Casso, 1986 to 1991. Amuso's reign. Victor Vic Amuso became boss, with Anthony Gaspipe Casso as underboss. Their leadership marked one of the most violent periods in the family's history. They ordered dozens of murders, including the assassination of suspected informants and rivals. Paranoia and betrayals. Amuso and Casso's paranoia led to internal purges, destabilizing the family. Casso turned informant in 1994 after being arrested but later recanted and was dropped as a government witness. Law enforcement pressure. The 1990s brought relentless law enforcement pressure. Many high-ranking members were arrested or became informants, further weakening the family. Modern-day Lucchese family. Current activities. Despite significant losses, the Lucchese family remains active in labor racketeering, gambling and loan sharking, money laundering and fraud. The family has also moved into cybercrime and other modern criminal enterprises. Leadership. The Lucchese family now operates with a much lower profile than in its heyday. Its current leadership remains largely unknown due to a deliberate strategy of secrecy. Resilience. While weakened, the Lucchese family has shown an ability to adapt and maintain its operations, albeit on a smaller scale. Key events and cultural legacy. The Lufthansa heist, 1978. Organized by Lucchese associates, this infamous robbery at JFK Airport netted over $5 million in cash and jewelry. The heist was later dramatized in the film Goodfellas. The Commission Trial, 1986. The conviction of Anthony Carallo and other mafia leaders marked a turning point in the FBI's war on organized crime. Cultural depictions. The Lucchese family's exploits have been featured in films, books, and TV shows, making it one of the most recognized mafia families in popular culture. Legacy. The Lucchese crime family has had a storied history, from its peak under Tommy Lucchese to its decline under leaders like Victor Amuzzo and Anthony Casso. While diminished in power, the family remains a significant player in New York's underworld, continuing its long tradition of adaptability and survival in the face of adversity. The Bonanno crime family is one of New York's 5 families, part of the American Mafia. Its history is marked by power, betrayal, and scandal, making it one of the most tumultuous mafia organizations. Founded in the early 20th century, the Bonanno family has experienced periods of dominance, internal strife, and eventual decline, though it remains active in organized crime today. The origins of the Bonanno family. Roots in Sicily. The family's origins trace back to the Sicilian Mafia in Castellammare del Golfo, a small town in western Sicily. Many early members of the Bonanno family immigrated to New York in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, bringing their criminal traditions with them. Castellammare War, 1930 to 1931. During Prohibition, the Bonanno family, led by Salvatore Maranzano, fought in the Castellammare War, a violent struggle against the faction led by Joe Masseria. Maranzano emerged victorious, establishing himself as the mafia's first boss of all bosses. However, his reign was short-lived. In 1931, Lucky Luciano orchestrated Maranzano's assassination and restructured the mafia into the 5 families, eliminating the boss of bosses title. The Bonanno family under Joseph Bonanno, 1931 to 1964. Joseph Joe Bananas Bonanno. After Maranzano's death, Joseph Bonanno, a young and ambitious mafioso, became the boss of the family at just 26 years old. He led the family for over 3 decades, making it one of the most powerful in New York. Criminal enterprises. The family was heavily involved in loan sharking, illegal gambling, extortion, and drug trafficking. Bonanno expanded the family's operations to include legitimate businesses, providing a cover for its illegal activities. The Golden Age. Under Bonanno's leadership, the family enjoyed stability and wealth, earning a reputation for loyalty and discipline. Bonanno maintained a low profile, which helped the family avoid the intense law enforcement scrutiny faced by other mafia families. The Bonanno Civil War, 1960s. The Banana War. In the 1960s, Joseph Bonanno attempted to consolidate power by plotting to assassinate other bosses on the Mafia Commission, including Carlo Gambino and Tommy Lucchese. The plot, known as the Bonanno coup, was exposed, leading to Bonanno's removal from power. A power struggle erupted within the family between factions loyal to Bonanno and those opposing him. This conflict became known as the Banana War and lasted for several years. Joseph Bonanno's downfall. In 1964, Bonanno disappeared for 19 months, allegedly kidnapped, though some believe he staged his disappearance to avoid his enemies. When he resurfaced, he was forced into retirement by the Commission, ending his reign. The turbulent years, 1970s-1980s. Philip Rusty Rastelli. After Bonanno's retirement, Philip Rastelli became boss in 1973, though his leadership was frequently challenged. Rastelli focused on rebuilding the family's rackets, particularly in the construction industry and loan sharking. Internal chaos. The Bonanno family suffered from a lack of unity and frequent leadership changes. Disloyalty and internal feuds weakened its structure. In 1979, Carmine Galante, a powerful and defiant mobster, tried to seize control of the family. Known for his involvement in heroin trafficking, Galante refused to share profits with the commission. His actions led to his assassination in 1979, sanctioned by the commission. Law enforcement pressure. In the 1980s, the FBI's use of the RICO Act targeted organized crime across the country. The Mangano family, weakened by internal strife, became increasingly vulnerable to law enforcement. The 1980s, the Donnie Brasco operation. The infamous FBI infiltration. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, the FBI infiltrated the Mangano family with agent Joseph Pistone, who operated undercover as Donnie Brasco. Pistone gained the trust of key family members, including Dominic Sonny Black Napolitano and Benjamin Lefty Ruggiero. The operation, which lasted 6 years, exposed the family's inner workings and led to numerous arrests and convictions. The infiltration was a massive blow to the Mangano family, damaging its reputation and weakening its power. Rebuilding under Joseph Massino, 1991 to 2004. Massino's rise. Joseph Massino, known as the Last Don, became boss in 1991. He rebuilt the family, restoring discipline and reducing law enforcement attention by emphasizing secrecy. Massino banned members from saying the family's name and even avoided the traditional mafia practice of public induction ceremonies. The return to power. Under Massino, the family regained some of its strength, focusing on traditional rackets like gambling, extortion, and loan sharking. He also diversified into legitimate businesses to launder money. Massino's downfall. In 2004, Massino was arrested and convicted on multiple charges, including murder and racketeering. Facing the death penalty, Massino became the first sitting mafia boss to turn informant, providing information about the Mafia Commission and Mangano family operations. Modern-day Mangano family. Current operations. The Mangano family remains active, though it operates on a much smaller scale than during its peak. Its criminal activities include loan sharking, illegal gambling, extortion, cybercrime, leadership. The family's current leadership is secretive, avoiding the public eye to reduce law enforcement attention. Reputation. While still part of the five families, the Mangano family is considered weaker than its counterparts due to past betrayals and law enforcement pressure. Legacy. The Mangano family's history is a cautionary tale of the dangers of internal betrayal and excessive ambition. From its early days under Joseph Mangano to its humiliation during the Donnie Brasco operation and Joseph Massino's defection, the family has experienced dramatic highs and lows. Despite its decline, the Mangano family remains a symbol of the mafia's enduring presence in organized crime. The Colombo crime family is one of New York's five families, a powerful mafia organization operating under the American La Cosa Nostra. Known for its intense internal power struggles and bloody feuds, the Colombo family has a tumultuous history that has often undermined its influence compared to the other families. Despite these challenges, it remains active in organized crime. The origins of the Colombo family. Founding. The family traces its origins to the 1920s under Joseph Profaci, who led a small Sicilian mafia group. In 1931, after the end of the Castellamariri War, Lucky Luciano officially organized the five families, with Profaci becoming the first boss of what would eventually be known as the Colombo family. Joseph Profaci's leadership, 1931 to 1962. Profaci was a traditional and deeply religious mafia boss who ruled with an iron fist. Criminal enterprises. The family profited from extortion, loan sharking, gambling, and narcotics trafficking. Profaci also maintained legitimate businesses, including olive oil importing, which earned him the nickname the Olive Oil King. Challenges to his rule. Despite his wealth, Profaci was criticized by his underlings for his greed, often demanding excessive tributes from family members. The Profaci-Gallo feud, 1950s-1960s. In the late 1950s, a rebellion arose within the family, led by Joe Gallo and his brothers, who opposed Profaci's leadership. The Gallos kidnapped key Profaci allies, including Joe Colombo, sparking a violent conflict that became known as the Gallo-Profaci War. Profaci managed to outmaneuver the Gallos, but the feud weakened the family and attracted unwanted law enforcement attention. Profaci died of cancer in 1962, leaving a power vacuum. The rise of Joe Colombo, 1963 to 1971. After Profaci's death, Joe Colombo, a trusted lieutenant, emerged as boss with the backing of the Mafia Commission. Public persona. Colombo was unique among mafia bosses for his public activism. In 1970, he founded the Italian-American Civil Rights League, ostensibly to combat discrimination, but also as a shield against law enforcement targeting Italian Americans. The League gained significant support and even organized large rallies, including one at Madison Square Garden. Conflict with law enforcement. Colombo's high-profile activities drew unwanted attention from the FBI and rival families. In 1971, Colombo was shot in an assassination attempt during an Italian-American Civil Rights League rally. He survived but was left incapacitated, effectively ending his reign. The Colombo Wars. The First Colombo War, 1971 to 1975. After Colombo was incapacitated, a power struggle erupted between his loyalists and Joe Gallo, who sought to reclaim influence. The feud escalated into open warfare, with multiple murders on both sides. Gallo was assassinated in 1972 at Umberto's Clam House in Little Italy, ending the immediate conflict. The Second Colombo War, 1980s. By the 1980s, the family was led by Carmine the Snake Pusico, a shrewd and ruthless boss. Pusico's leadership was challenged by Victor Orena, who attempted to take over the family while Pusico was in prison. The feud led to a violent power struggle known as the Second Colombo War, with dozens of murders and heavy law enforcement scrutiny. Pusico retained control but at great cost, as the family was severely weakened by internal strife and FBI pressure. The Third Colombo War, 1991 to 1993. Another internal conflict arose in the early 1990s when Pusico attempted to maintain control of the family from prison. Dissident factions, led by Greg Scoppa, clashed with loyalists, resulting in yet another bloody war. Law enforcement took advantage of the chaos, leading to numerous indictments and convictions that decimated the family. Modern-day Colombo family. Decline and resilience. The Colombo family has struggled to regain its former strength, largely due to decades of internal feuds and law enforcement pressure. Despite these challenges, it remains active in organized crime, focusing on loan sharking, illegal gambling, extortion, cybercrime, labor racketeering in construction and unions. Leadership today. The family operates under a decentralized structure to avoid law enforcement scrutiny. Current leadership is kept secret, with an emphasis on low-profile operations. Notable figures in Colombo history. Joseph Profaci, 1931 to 1962. The family's founding boss, known for his wealth and control over olive oil imports. Joe Colombo, 1963 to 1971. A charismatic leader who gained public attention through the Italian-American Civil Rights League. Carmine Pusico, 1970s-1990s. A long-reigning boss who maintained control from prison despite leading the family through its most violent and chaotic periods. Joe Gallo, 1950s-1970s. A rebellious capo whose actions sparked multiple internal wars. Greg Scoppa, 1990s. A capo and FBI informant involved in the Third Colombo War. Criminal enterprises. Labor racketeering, control over unions and extortion of construction companies. Illegal gambling, running bookmaking operations, poker games, and sports betting. Loan sharking, providing high-interest loans to those unable to borrow from legitimate sources. Extortion, forcing businesses to pay for protection or favorable contracts. Drug trafficking, less prominent than other families but historically involved in narcotics distribution. Legacy. The Colombo family's history is a cautionary tale of how internal power struggles and public exposure can weaken even the most powerful criminal organizations. While it remains one of the 5 families, the Colombo family has never fully recovered from its decades of infighting and law enforcement scrutiny. Today, it operates at a reduced capacity but still serves as a reminder of the mafia's enduring presence in American organized crime.